with great education. It's not privatized like Governor Bill Lee's trying to do. Everyone wants to live in a community where you've got fair and equitable access to health care. And I think those are the same concerns that I hear about here in Memphis. And if you want to talk about dealing with gun crime, for example, we need to think about how we deal with poverty, because poverty is at the root of a lot of the problems that we're encountering in our communities. And so how do you get people lifted up? You give them a great education, you keep them healthy, you give them equal opportunities in the workplace. That's what I'm going to do when I'm governor.
Thank you very much. Dr. Atwater, and the question again, the priorities.
Ironically, I'm the only one on this panel probably that has boots on the ground for 25 years, feeding 10,000 people living into poverty and homeless people. So what I mainly hear is crime. We had 354 people to get killed in the city of Memphis, 18 children, 2 children that I represent. And also they talk about livable wages and losing their homes through to back taxes. Also, they want a person to represent them and clean up the blight in their community.
You still have a little bit more time if you like.
Yes, and another thing too, I administer care to homeless women and domestic violent women, and they get raped every day on the streets of Memphis, so I house them. I have 5 women today that I'm housing under my Underground Railroad. So that's a major concern in Memphis also.
Thank you very much. The next question in the order will be Dr. Martin, Dr. Atwater, and Councilman Smiley. The federal infrastructure law passed in 2021 provides massive new funding for projects across the country. Memphis and Shelby County have historically received disproportionately less than other parts of the state of Tennessee. What would you do to ensure that Memphis and Shelby County receive their due? Dr. Martin.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we have an historic amount of money coming our way from the federal infrastructure bill. It's $8 billion headed towards Tennessee. We need to make sure that that money is equitably distributed across the state. And I've heard from my multiple trips to Memphis that folks here feel like they're on an island, that people in Nashville don't care about them. And I want to change the tone of politics in the state of Tennessee and make sure that every community in this state gets a fair shake. And that means reaching out to local community leaders, finding out what the projects are, what the pinch points are in those communities, and then making sure that we bring the resources to bear efficiently to get those projects taken care of. I want to be someone who brings this state together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Dr. Atwater, again, the infrastructure.
I think infrastructure is nice, but again, I'm more concerned about the human infrastructure, not about building new buildings. I think Memphis has built enough buildings now, so we need to house people living on the streets, homeless people, and single parents that is struggling to stay in their homes and getting evicted every day. So I think some of that money should be allocated to human capital and not just building hotels and apartments and luxury homes where most of the people that I cater to would never live in these apartments or homes. So I think if we're going to receive money, then we need to allocate the money to the people that need the money the most, and that's people living in poverty.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atwater. And again, Councilman Smiley, the question is about how do you ensure that Memphis and Shelby County receive the infrastructure funds that they're due?
Thank you for the question. I spent a lot of time talking about, how West Tennessee and Memphis has been treated by the folks in Nashville. I think what's incumbent upon everyone in this room who lives in Shelby County, lives in Memphis, Tennessee, it's time for us to send someone to Nashville who actually knows what it's like to walk the streets in our community. Quite too often we elect people who only come to our state for photo ops, only come to our community to take pictures with the decision makers. It's time for us to elect someone who knows what it's like to live in this community, not someone who has to pick up a book or hire someone to learn about what's happening in this community, but someone who puts Shelby County at the forefront of every decision. How do I make sure that Shelby County is receiving funding or West Tennessee receiving funding? By making it a priority. It's time out for treating West Tennessee like a stepchild of the past. Treat us with the respect that every person in every community deserves.
Thank you very much. In the next question, the order will be Dr. Atwater, Councilman Smiley, and Dr. Martin. This past Monday, the state Supreme Court rejected a request to revisit its decision to uphold the Tennessee Education Savings Account program, which affects only Shelby County schools and Metro Nashville public schools. Would you continue or discontinue the ESA program if elected, and why? Dr. Atwater?
I would discontinue the program. I'm strictly for public schools, and I think public schools is a civil rights. And so I would go in and allocate more money to the public schools. And also, it's really unfair that that happened, but life is not about a box of chocolate. But I think that the children that I have catered to in this particular area, not only do they have problems in the education system, but they live in poverty, they see gunshots every day on the school, they live in crime, in drug-infested areas. So we have to look at the trauma that these children are addressing also too, not just the education system, but the trauma that they're going through every day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atwater. Councilman Smiley in the Education Savings Account program.
Governor Lee has been hell-bent on destroying public education for quite some time. He made it is his priority to create this new industry. Private education funded by public dollars, but that's not the intent. We talk a lot about the voucher program, and I practice law for a living. I want to be clear, this voucher bill will be held unconstitutional. But when it's held unconstitutional, we still have to worry about TISA, because TISA is designed to do the same thing the voucher program was designed to do. You make it student funding, allow the dollars to follow the students, but what happens when those students go to private school? Our public education system will be essentially eradicated. We have to discontinue programs like the voucher system. We have to amend TISA to make sure that every child that goes to public education has the resources necessary to achieve whatever they so desire in this state.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Dr. Martin.
Governor Lee is wrong on public education, period. He's waged a war on public education his entire time in office. I mean, this is the guy who is firing teachers for telling the truth. This is the guy who doesn't speak up whenever books are getting burned. This is the guy who thinks it's okay to politicize school boards. That doesn't help our children. And the voucher program that he is trying to employ in Shelby County and Davidson County is another weapon to defund public schools, and we need to stand up against it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. This next question, we'll start with Councilman Smiley and Dr. Martin, and with Dr. Atwater. The United States Supreme Court is set to issue a ruling soon on a Mississippi abortion case. What do you believe the right decision on abortion rights should be? And what would you do as governor to provide options for pregnant people seeking an abortion if the trigger law goes into effect? We'll start with Councilman Smiley.
I find it ironic when we look at the General Assembly and Congress, no offense, men, they're made up of mostly men, and if they understood anything about reproductive justice, they understood anything about reproductive health, they would accept the absolute truth that women are entitled to make decisions regarding their own bodies. And what I would do, and I think we have to talk about what's feasible for the governor. First of all, we speak out against it. Government has no place in a woman's womb. Matter of fact, they need to mind their own business. Yeah. But in addition to that, we also need to be talking about how do we put women in a better position. In this state, a white woman makes 81 cents for every $1 a white male makes. But that number changes when you go to black women and Latino women. We need to take a strong look at amending the Tennessee Equal Pay Act so that women will be paid a fair share in this state. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Dr. Martin?
Yeah, so if Roe gets overturned, as the rumors go, it's going to be a tragedy for the United States. It doesn't have to be a tragedy for Tennessee. The dubious distinction of taking away women's health rights belongs to Governor Bill Lee and the radical General Assembly supermajority that have passed this trigger law that will take women's health rights away 30 days after Roe gets overturned. And here's what I think about women's health rights. The government has no role in that doctor's office with a woman, her healthcare provider, her family, and her God. Period. Abortion laws don't stop abortions. Abortion laws stop safe abortions. Abortion laws don't stop abortions for everyone. They stop abortions for marginalized communities. They stop abortions for communities that don't have the means to travel to another state to get the services, which is what's going to happen. So we need to work and explore executive actions and use every ounce of the power in the governor's office to stop this from happening and to protect women's health rights.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Dr. Atwater.
As the only woman on this panel and the person who was raped at 16, I want to talk about the reality of this. Most women that I have catered to, and it's been about 100 per year, and talk about boots on the ground. I'm not using theory. I'm talking about life experience with the women who have been raped and beat and drugged and killed, and mostly under the umbrella of my program. So I don't think that I have to do anything different as a governor. I've been assisting women in domestic violence, rape, abortions for over 25 years. So I think that it is a wrong decision, and I would fight with every being in my body to help women and assist women with abortions.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to transition to my colleague, Sam Hardiman, who covers City Hall and politics in Memphis. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm not nearly as eloquent or good-looking as David. So my first question, we'll start with Dr. Atwater and we'll work our way down, is Memphis has been underrepresented in recent years in the governorship and the U.S. Senate. Dr. Atwater and Councilman Smiley, as a Memphian, how do you make the case to people from West Tennessee and East Tennessee that they should choose you? And Dr. Martin, as someone from Middle Tennessee, how do you convince Memphis and Shelby County that they should choose you over their native son or daughter? Dr. Atwater, you first.
I think they should choose me because I have life experience, boots on the ground. I feed 10,000 individuals a year, donate 5,000 book bags and coats to the children, 5,000 school supplies. I donate 200 heaters and air conditioning every year to senior citizens. So I have a proven record of what I can do as a governor. I would take that transition, that same kindred spirit into governorship. And I think that's why most people should vote for me, because I have the life experience and I'm not talking, I'm walking a walk.
Okay, yeah, so I understand that there are lots of different ways that Tennesseans can be broken down and divided. We can be East and Middle and West Tennessee. We can be Republicans and Democrats. We can be Black Tennesseans and White Tennesseans and Brown Tennesseans. When I go out and talk to communities, I focus on the things that we have in common. And I think that's the way you endear people from people outside of your region, people who don't look like you, people who maybe even don't think like you politically, to come on board and consider you as a candidate. That's how we pick up 400,000 new votes. That's how Democrats win this election. We do it by talking about the things that bring us together: healthcare, access to a great education, fair access to jobs across the state, not just in the cities, but in the rural communities as well. You know, legalizing cannabis, things that everybody wants in this state. Those are the things that we focus on. That's how you win. Councilman Smiley.
Thank you for the question. It was a pretty good question, Sam. I expected nothing but the less. But in all seriousness, if West Tennessee and Shelby County wants to stop being left behind, you elect someone from Shelby County. But in addition to that, don't elect me simply because I'm from Shelby County. Elect me because I am the most qualified. What we need is someone who is competent but also compassionate. I can sit down at the table to make sure the laws are working with us because I'm a trained lawyer. But also, you don't have to guess or listen to hypotheticals about what I may do. You can look at my track record. We've done good. And look at the district that I serve. I have the poorest zip code in the state, but also one of the most affluent zip codes in the state. Democrats, Republicans, Independents have all voted for me because they understand that I understand people, they understand where my heart is, and it's always about raising the floor for marginalized communities. We've already seen what it looks like when we hire or we elect someone with no government experience. Do something different this time.
For our next question, we will start with Dr. Martin, go to Councilman Smiley, and then Dr. Atwater. Political sentiment about longer prison sentences, known as truth in sentencing legislation, has been mixed. Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland supports truth in sentencing legislation. Governor Bill Lee let it become law without his signature. What is your position on the bill? And if you oppose it, would you try to repeal it if in office?
I would absolutely try to repeal the truth in sentencing legislation that Governor Lee let become law without his signature. And I want to point out to you guys that Governor Bill Lee put out a statement talking about what a terrible piece of legislation this was, how it was going to be ineffective. It didn't meet the goals that the legislature, wanted it to meet. But he did not have the political courage to do the right thing and veto it. Even if they were going to go back and override him, for goodness sake, stand for something, right? Stand for something. And that's why I want to be governor, because I think you need someone who's going to have a heart for service, who's going to go out and look out for marginalized communities. If these folks have an opportunity and they've been following the rules and they have an opportunity to get out early and restart their lives, we should support that rather than locking them up in for-profit prisons.
Councilman Smiley.
This governor is weak. Every time he has an opportunity to do the right thing, he simply takes his hand off and says, well, the General Assembly passed this particular piece of legislation. I think it's wrong, so I'm going to allow it to go into law. That makes no sense. What you do in this position, it may get uncomfortable at times, but you lead people. You veto problematic legislation. But if we look at what truth in sentencing is, we've already seen this. This is the 90s all over again. It does not work. What happens is Black and brown communities are over-policed. Black and brown communities end up in jail. And when we have for-profit prisons like Core Civic, Black and brown bodies make up a large percentage of those individuals in those beds. We need to immediately repeal truth in sentencing. And just because I have an opportunity to talk about it, Mayor Jim Strickland is wrong. Mayor Jim Strickland does not understand what it's like to go through anything else.
Councilman, your time. Dr. Atwater.
Going back to real life experiences, I am the person who sued the city, the county, and the state of Tennessee for the same matter. So, and I'm the same person that, again, boots on the ground. I have created almost 500 jobs for ex-felons. Also have assisted them in expungements. I have created businesses for them, a landscaping business. So I'm not going to be a governor to just wait until I get a title or position. I have been assisting the people on the ground from day one for 25 years. So I wouldn't do anything different. What I would do is rescind that law and move forward. That's part of my platform also too, is to address mass incarceration.
You have more time if you would like to use it.
Okay, and also too, Governor Lee, he incorporated a bill, a crime bill, and then the next week, he went back and increased the incarceration policy. So
Your time's now up. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'll work the timer a little better. I apologize.
That's okay.
My next question, I will start with Councilman Smiley, and we will then work our way back down. Environmental justice is among the most important issues in Memphis, Tennessee, whether it is the health of the Memphis Sand Aquifer or our air quality, which is lacking. What would you do using the power of the office of the governor to promote better environmental stewardship and sustainability?
Thank you for that question. First of all, we need to, as it relates specifically to Shelby County, we need to stop crude oil pipelines from coming through marginalized communities and destroying our aquifer. Right now, there's a particular piece of legislation in the state that's trying to override the city council decision to stop the crude oil pipeline from coming through our community. But as it relates to my role as governor, I think one of the most efficient, the most effective thing is we have to get to the point in which drawdown. Drawdown is the level in which carbon emissions, greenhouse gases start to drastically decrease. The way that we do that is we're investing in renewable energy, solar energy, electric vehicles, and also green infrastructure. We have to make a concerted effort to put the environment at the forefront of our mind as opposed to always valuing profit.
Dr. Martin.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Councilman, that we, should support Memphis in their effort to stop the pipeline from crossing the Memphis aquifer and putting the water supply at risk. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I think we should work with the state to stop them from overriding the local community's decision. I also think we should be talking about the green energy revolution that's happening right here in Tennessee. The fact that the Blue Oval City is going to be developed here in Southwest Tennessee. The fact that we're making electric cars in Spring Hill, that we're making electric cars in Chattanooga, we're making electric cars in Smyrna. We need to be talking about that because that's bringing in really good jobs and green cars to the state of Tennessee. We also need to talk about pushing on TVA to make their energy mix greener. And I know that you all have an issue right now with TVA, and you might be able to use your negotiations with them to convince them to go to a greener mix.
Dr. Atwater.
Again, I do not have to speak in theory. I can speak in life experiences. I've been fighting against environmental injustice for over 40 years. Memphis citizens against the pipeline. I was one of those people that fought with them when they tried to run the pipeline through Boxtown and Westwood and run it through black farmers' property. They want to take their property. I also fought with the Firestone Environmental Control Board. And in Clarksville, I fought against that. So I have a lifetime history of fighting against environmental injustice. One of the things we need to address as the governor, I would put together a comprehensive environmental injustice plan so that I can address the health, welfare of the people, especially the children, because you have children being exposed with lead and different toxins and cause environmental problems.
This is my last question before David returns to the podium. And so we'll start again with Dr. Atwater. How should the office of the governor be used to ease the violence that plagues Memphis?
I think the office of the governor, first of all, need to be rid of systemic racism. Until we address systemic racism, we will still have business as usual. So I don't think that it's going to be an easy answer, but I think it's a governor with a open mind, diversified mind to treat everybody equally, and then we can address the violence. I think that in different neighborhoods, until you give funding and stop the disinvestment in communities, give affordable housing, good schools, quality schools, address the food deserts, the domestic violence, we will continue to have violence in Memphis until we get real and address the real issues. So that's why I keep saying that I'm not about theory. I'm about putting in the work and addressing all people, bringing everybody to the table. In order to address violence, you must bring all stakeholders to the table. Gang members.
Dr. Atwater, your time.
Oh, ran out this time.
Dr. Martin.
Yeah. Again, I think we need to talk about issues of prosperity. We need to talk about how we create prosperous communities, and that's how you deal with the scourge of violence across the state. And that means investing in education, healthcare, and infrastructure, and giving people options, right? The other thing we need to do in the state of Tennessee is have a conversation about guns. Governor Lee is wrong on guns. He passed permitless carry, signed it into law against the advice of so many people, business leaders, faith leaders, the Sheriff's Association, the police chiefs, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. He and the General Assembly are radical on that issue. And y'all, it's killing people. So we need common sense. Look, I'm all for, I stand for the Second Amendment, I support the Second Amendment, but permitless carry is a bridge too far. I want to know that if someone is in a restaurant with me and my family, or you and your family, and they've got a concealed weapon, that they've had a basic amount of training and a background check. It's just common sense.
Councilman?
I think we spend a lot of time talking about issues in Memphis and Shelby County, but what I know to be true is a lot of crime is crime based on the root causes of crime, which is poverty. A lot of crime has to deal with poverty. If we don't give the folks who live in these communities an opportunity to do more, they're gonna go take from someone else. We have to put dollars in people's pockets. Studies show that folks with dollars in their pocket are less likely to commit crime. But what we're doing is we're saturating communities with low-wage jobs and expect them to work 4 or 5 jobs and struggle to make ends meet and think they're not gonna go take it from someone else. We have to invest in people. But in addition to that, Dr. Martin talked about this governor. This governor, not only did he sign permitless carrying law, he went to a gun manufacturing plant, signed permitless carrying law, and told Memphis and Shelby County, you can go to you know where. This governor does not care about our communities. This governor does not care about our people. If we understand that, we would do something different.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate your time up here, and thank you to the candidates for answering these questions. So you have me again. I'm actually now turning over to some audience questions. They submitted these questions as they registered. So we'll start with Councilman Smiley, Dr. Martin, and then Dr. Atwater. What will you do to address inflation in Tennessee if you are elected governor? Councilman Smiley.
Thank you for the question. I think for starters, what we have to understand where we are as a society. We spend a lot of time talking about the cost of living in this state, and truth, it's one of the lowest in the nation. But we're spending a lot of time not addressing the elephant in the room. The fact that we simply are not paying people enough. I don't think this is a conversation that we're having enough. I try not to talk about a minimum wage because the conversation should not be about a minimum wage. The conversation should be always about providing people a living wage. Soon, our body on the Memphis City Council will have a conversation about how do we deal with tax incentives. What you will see is a proposal by council members to increase the amount of dollars required that every employee receives when we start to incentivize business. We have to start making sure that we have good corporate citizens in this state.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Inflation.
Yeah, inflation is a huge problem, and it's not just here in Tennessee, obviously, it's a global problem. And I think as governor, you have a special ability to advocate to the federal government for some changes. I'd like to see the tariffs that are making the inputs for our farmers, the inputs for our factories here in Tennessee more expensive. I'd like to see those go away so that savings can be passed on to consumers. You know, I also think we need to do is quit ignoring communities in need. Why did it take an election year? Why did it take an election year for Governor Bill Lee to release some of the TANF funds? This is money for needy families that they've been hoarding for years and years. And now that they hear some footsteps on the Democratic side, now they're going to start releasing some money. We also need to just take better care of folks. And that's what we're going to do when I'm governor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Atwater.
Again, when I become governor, I'm going to transition into what I believe. And what I believe is for tax incentive, I think we need to do away with tax incentive to corporations because they have abused that. And I think that I would love to see as a governor give the everyday citizen tax incentive, food incentive, go back and give them housing incentives as far as housing and urban development homes, affordable homes, and also to give the parents some type of incentive so they can do better for their children. I think that's where the money needs to go. I think we need to go back and allocate the money to the citizen, put the citizen back into politics. And I don't think it's the responsibility of a politician to dictate to the citizen what they should or should not have.
Thank you very much. The next question will go with Dr. Martin, Dr. Atwater, and Councilman Smiley. Former President Trump is coming to town this weekend, and 61% of Tennesseans voted for him in the 2020 election. If you're elected governor, and even as a candidate, how do you address the concerns of voters who supported him in 2016 and in 2020? Dr. Martin.
Yeah, I think you have to win their support by engaging, right? And I know that's not easy to do, to go into communities where you may not feel welcome and take questions that are going to be difficult and may seem unreasonable, but you have to engage folks, and you have to take these big national issues and you have to boil it down and create community-sized solutions. For example, when we go out and talk to maybe an 80-20 Trump County, I always ask people, tell me about healthcare in this community, tell me about education in this community, and just let them go. And they will, they'll go. And so then what you do is you come back with solutions. Let's talk about fully funding our public schools so that our teachers don't feel left behind. Let's talk about what Medicaid expansion does for you. It brings that hospital back to your community. Bringing that hospital back brings those factories back to your community. And so you have to tie these big national issues to things that matter in those local communities. And the only way to do that is with engagement and face time and hard work.
Thank you. Dr. Atwater?
What I have been very careful about is being a robotic politician on this campaign. So I try to speak from my heart, and I try to be the voice of the people. Yesterday I went out and did several interviews on the street, and most of the people on the street had told me exactly what they want in this city. And one of the things that the guy talked about is he wants lower taxes. He wants money for gas. And another guy said he wants money for his small business. He's barely surviving, and he's about to go out of business because he does not have the money from the government. So again, I would make people the center of anything that I do when it comes to being the governor of the state of Tennessee. And that's why I call myself the boots on the ground governor, and I am the people's governor.
Thank you, Dr. Atwater. Councilman Smiley.
Did you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. So President Trump is coming to Memphis this weekend, and we know that 61% of Tennessee voters voted for former President Trump in 2020. So how do you, as a candidate and if elected governor, engage voters who voted for President Trump in terms of advancing your policy positions?
Well, I do that every single day. My work on the council, I'm a nonpartisan elected official. My district is made up of Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. The folks that I work with and serve with on the Memphis City Council, more specifically speaking, one of our previous chairs was the fundraising chair for Donald Trump in Shelby County. But when it comes time for us to get to work, I always keep in mind the role of government. It's really simple, to provide for the general welfare of its people. Because I take that approach and I work hard to reach common ground, most of the pieces of legislation that I've passed before our body has been supported by both Democrats and Republicans. It doesn't matter if it was criminal justice reform. It did not matter if it was passing a 5-year infrastructure improvement plan for MLGW. What we all understand is we have a job. And I always remind my colleagues, our job is to put people in a better position. We've done a pretty good job of that. And that's the type of leadership I would bring to the governor's office.
We'll start with Dr. Atwater, the Councilman Smiley, and then Dr. Martin. This has to do with Memphis a few years ago made a decision to remove Confederate monuments from its park. There has been a lot more discussion in recent years about racial reckoning, about white supremacy, and about that legacy of trying to eliminate racism. How would you frame these types of discussions to be able to advance your directives if elected governor, since you'll be going to 95 counties and trying to convince citizens of those counties? Dr. Atwater?
As a historian, I did not have any problem with the Confederate statue per se, but I was one of the few people that protested against it 25 years ago. I think that I respect every person's history. Every citizen history is important. So just like I respect my Juneteenth and my slavery and my kings and queens history, I also respect people that believe in the Confederacy. But that does not mean I believe in discriminatory action or racist action. And we do have a rise in hate crime and hate groups. State of Tennessee is third in the most growing state for hate groups. 34 hate groups in the state of Tennessee. So again, we have to go back and address systemic racism. I don't think it's about someone's culture or what history they like or do not like. But again, to be honest about it, I own a museum, a historical museum, and I would have been glad to get those Confederate statues.
Thank you very much. Councilman Smiley, the question is advancing policies to eliminate racism and address white supremacy in the state of Tennessee.
Okay, thank you. So first I want to acknowledge where we stand and the people who help us get there. First, there's been people in the city of Memphis who advocated for the immediate removal for the Confederate statues for a long time. Commissioner Julian Bolton, former Commissioner Walter Bailey, Tammy Sawyer, Van Turner, Jim Strickland. Those folks worked hard And Confederate take them down 9/11. They worked really hard to have those statues removed because they did not want little black boys and little black girls who have to walk past those symbols of hatred to always think about they were treated inferior. So I'm absolutely happy that the city of Memphis took those proactive steps to take down those monuments. But as it relates to having those difficult conversations, we have to have them. The reason that this country is great is because we can have political discourse, we can talk about ideas, but ultimately move forward. We don't have to spend all our time thinking about trying to make people comfortable. What we should be doing is talking about whether or not we're raising the floor for marginalized communities, talking about how we can do things better.
Thank you. Dr. Martin.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I absolutely agree with the others. I'm glad those monuments are gone. Though it's part of American history, it should not be celebrated. And I want to just address the elephant in the room. I'm a middle-aged white guy from Middle Tennessee. I do not know the walk of a black Tennessean or a brown Tennessean in 2022, but I try to understand, I try to educate myself, and I try to be a part of the solution. Whether that's working at Meharry Medical College and training tomorrow's healthcare heroes, people who are going to go out and serve these communities, whether it's raising my kids with a set of values where they value everyone regardless of the color of their skin or who they choose to love or where they live. And so I think that as a human being, I try to walk that walk, and I'm going to take that same focus and that same mentality to the governor's office.
Thank you very much. This next question, we'll start with Councilman Smiley, Dr. Martin, and Dr. Atwater. This comes from the audience, and there's the perception that there's a terrible relationship between municipalities, particularly large cities like Memphis and Nashville, the state legislature. How do you resolve those particular issues that grind at the relationship? So Councilman Smiley, please.
I think a lot of times folks talk in hypotheticals. Well, I don't have to really talk in hypotheticals. I can tell you what I have done. One of my mentors told me that the wheels of government move slow. I didn't necessarily buy that. I took a completely different approach. Prior to my election, I made it a concerted effort to go have lunch with some of the folks who sit on the other side of the aisle so that I can understand where they were coming from, their pain points, and what they believe their constituents want. As governor, that's exactly the same thing I would do. I will have sit-down meetings with every member of the General Assembly, because if I'm ever to get anything done with a supermajority, I need to know the people that I'm working with, form a relationship with them. So when we have problematic legislation like the Truth in Sentencing bill, like the bill that criminalizes homelessness, we can work hard together to eliminate those particular pieces of legislation before they ever come to the governor's desk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin.
Can you repeat the question for me? I want to make sure was it about the relationship between local governments and state government?
That's correct.
Yeah, and the friction between them?
Yes, sir.
Right. So I believe, as a matter of principle, that government is most effective when it's by the people, when the people providing the government are closest to the people. I don't think that the state should make it a practice of usurping local governments. Because when they do it, it's always for punishment, right? It's because they don't like something that you're doing. For example, let's think back to the COVID crisis when a couple of school districts were trying to require temporary masking requirements for students to keep their kids and their teachers safe. What did they do? They threatened to put voucher programs in those counties, right? They threatened and then followed through and made school board elections political. And that's all games. That's all about power and not about taking care of people that they are chosen to serve, or are charged to serve. So when I'm governor, we're going to put people first. We're not going to play games. We're going to take care of folks.
Thank you very much. Dr. Atwater.
When I become governor, I think that unless you have people-oriented and community-driven, you will not have government. If government is not surrounded by the people, then I don't think it's government. So with the friction between local and state government, I think that they need to go back to the table and revise their policies where even if the local leaders make a decision, I think people still should be in the center of that decision. On the state level, I think people still should be at the center of their policy and procedure. So I think that until we put people back into government, we're not going to move forward. in our government.
Thank you very much. The next question, we'll start with Dr. Martin and Dr. Atwater and Councilman Smiley. And the topic is affordable housing. According to the data company Roofstock, rents in Memphis have increased 39% year over year, and Memphis was listed as the #1 market where first-time buyers are fighting investors for a house. There's an affordable housing crisis all over the state. As governor, how will you address that crisis? Dr. Martin.
Yeah, we hear about this every single place we stop. Housing is out of control. And so a couple things we can do. First of all, we need to put more money in people's pockets. And again, that goes back to creating that prosperity, which is based on healthcare, education, and great infrastructure. There are also a lot of creative solutions that we've run across the state. Cities have come up with affordable housing funds that they're using in partnership to make public-private partnerships so that new developments have subsidized housing, a certain percentage of the housing. That leads to not only financially diverse populations living together, but racially diverse populations living together. And I think that's hugely important. I know Mr. Turley right here in Tennessee has been really effective at creating these types of communities.
Thank you very much. Dr. Atwater, again, how do you solve the affordable housing crisis as governor?
It's ironic that Dr. Martin would mention Mr. Tully. And again, I sued the city, the county, and the state for $20 billion with the discrimination of housing when it relates to underserved and marginalized people. Mr. Tully was one of those people that lawsuit addressed. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired of the local, state, and federal government putting money into rich investors' hands, where they're pushing poor people poor and poorer, and the middle class people are losing homes every day, getting evicted out of their homes every day. So I am totally against when you talk about affordable homes, but the affordable homes is not in the plan. The plan that they have across the state of Tennessee is a plan of genocide, to genocide poor people out of the home and create genocide and gentrification. And we can't play with that anymore. We need to be addressing the issue head on, and I'm not going to sweet talk when it comes to affordable homes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Councilman Smiley, how do you address the affordable housing crisis, please?
I think people across the state have to accept the truth. Bill Lee is about two things: big business and big donors. He's doing the business of those big businesses, allowing developers to come into our communities while leaving us behind. We have to stop that. And I think one of the things that we can do, in addition to establishing a living wage, in addition to fully funding affordable housing trust funds across this state, we have to take, a very tactical approach. And one of the things that you get with me as governor, someone who understands the law, understands how we can carve solutions in those public incentives. We spend a lot of money, we give a lot of incentives to big business, but what we can do, we can create conditions in which when they come in our communities, we can mandate that they provide affordable housing. We have that within our right, but a lot of times, as we travel across the state, communities don't know that. When we get public dollars, we can mandate affordable housing.
Thank you very much. We have 3 questions left before the closing statements. The next one is an audience question who references Senator Howard Baker, the late Howard Baker, who famously said the other fellow might be right and was seen as a paragon of civility. And the question is, how do you bring back civility and civil discourse into politics? Dr. Atwater, Councilman Smiley, and Dr. Martin. Dr. Atwater.
You bring it back by just common decency, common respect for every person in the state of Tennessee and across the United States. I think you bring it back by bringing people to the table of prosperity and including people as far as the LGBTQ community, women, children, ex-felons. So until we bring everyone to the table, we will not have that balance, have the balance.
Thank you very much. Next, the Councilman Smiley. Again, this is bringing back civility into politics.
we need to support people who understand the importance of being civil. I think Dr. Martin and Dr. Atwater and I are fine examples of what it looks like to aggressively seek a position but remain cordial with one another. So kudos to both of you. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that we are having these conversations early on. If we're having political discourse at home, if we bring back civics into schools, students will understand that it's okay to have a different opinion as long as you remain respectful. But right now, we don't do that. We demonize teachers. We stop trying to allow courses to be taught that make folks understand that we have to respect one another. We have to start early. It starts with the families, but it also starts with the leaders in our community. We have to treat each other better.
Thank you very much. Dr. Martin?
So, a couple of things I want you to know about me personally. I'm not a name caller. I'm not a flamethrower. I'm a calm person. I'm a bridge builder. And I think that tone will be helpful in government. I think that the party divisiveness, the regional divisiveness, all the stuff that we've talked about tonight has been damaging to us here in Tennessee. And we need to turn down the volume and come together. And as part of that, we need to speak out against Governor Bill Lee, who has never missed an opportunity to attack a marginalized community, right? And I'm talking about our LGBTQ plus community members that he's openly attacked with the slate of hate in the legislature. I'm talking about making homelessness a felony, not having the courage to stand up against that. And so I think that we need to come together, turn the volume down, care for one another, and talk about issues that apply to all of us. We all want a chance to live in a prosperous Tennessee.
Thank you very much. You've both been asked the same question before. It's a regional question, which is, what are one or two places you tell visitors they must see in order to experience the Memphis that you know and enjoy the most? So we'll start with Councilman Smiley, Dr. Martin, and then Dr. Atwater. And I know you might get in trouble here, but it's just a question. I'm a visitor, and I am coming out of town. Where do you send me?
That question is not fair. Now I may not be able to go to eat in some of the fine dining restaurants in the city of Memphis. Okay, so my family home is on the Mississippi Boulevard. It's less than 2 blocks from the Four-Way Grill. So my entire life, right around the corner from Metropolitan Baptist Church, my entire life I walked to the Four-Way restaurant. Historic, but they have some really, really good food. And if you have some time and you're sticking around Memphis, please go get a catfish plate from the Four-Way Grill. It's amazing. But in addition to that, to experience Memphis, I always tell people, don't just visit the Civil Rights Museum. Go to South Memphis and go to the Mason Temple. Now, if you understand what Mason Temple means, it's the place in which Dr. King gave his last speech. It's a powerful place to be. It's history there. And there's so many freedom fighters that walk the streets of Memphis that have visited Mason Temple.
Thank you very much, Councilman Smiley. Dr. Martin.
So admittedly, when I come to Memphis, I'm a tourist, right? I do touristy things. And so, for us, in our family, it's been seeing the National Civil Rights Museum. It's been, hearing amazing music on Beale Street. It's been all the touristy things, right? My very first interview that I ever had with a reporter as a candidate was with Mr. Hardman, and he asked me the dreaded barbecue question. Yes, and this is the first time I had experienced this with my campaign manager, Emily Couples, was just is waving as much as she could. But I would like to declare tonight that we are going to try one and only, and I'll let you know.
Thank you.
It's pretty good.
Dr. Atwater, where would you recommend I go as a tourist?
Well, I must confess I'm a vegetarian, so I've never tasted chitlins or pork chops and all that in my life. But, so I don't have any recommendation on food. But I would like to recommend you to go to the Cucamonga African American History Museum. I own that museum, and ironically, we talk about Bill Lee trying to get rid of the CRT training in universities. I have the largest collection of slave shackles and slave documents and rattles, a Buffalo Soldier Museum, Tuskegee Airmen Museum, a Middle Passage Museum, Cotton Jubilee Museum. So I think that would be a good museum to visit. And I'm shocked that Councilman Smiley didn't mention that, because I afforded that museum to him when he first ran for his first office.
Well, thank you. Was there another recommendation for me? Any statement?
That means I get 30 seconds to talk.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand the rules. All right. First of all, thank you, Dr. Atwater, for allowing me to use your museum and also your endorsement when I ran for office. But in addition to that, it's a fabulous museum. But since I have 15 more seconds, I just wanted to take the time to thank each and every one of you. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here. I thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Councilman Smiley. Our final question before concluding remarks. I'd like you to name a person who's had a deep influence on your life, and what's one lesson you could share with the audience? And we'll start with Dr. Atwater, go to Dr. Martin, and then Councilman Smiley. Again, name a person who's had a deep influence on your life, and what's a life lesson you can share? Dr. Atwater.
If you had asked me that 5 years ago, it would have been a different story. But last year, a young man by the name of Solomon, who was in my African American ballerina program, he was killed. He was 16 years old. So he made a great impression on my life. He had such a sweet spirit, loving spirit, and he reminded me when I was a teenager. So that would be one person that I think made a big impact on my life. And ironically, yesterday when I was doing my interview, I heard gunshots about 150 feet away from me, and that reminded me of Solomon and him getting killed last year.
Thank you. Dr. Martin?
So I'd like to highlight my grandmother, Mary Stevens. She's probably watching tonight online, MMA. She had a tragedy early on in her life. My grandfather, her husband, died of a brain tumor. And she was in her 40s and had been a homemaker her entire life. This was back in the 1970s. And she had the gumption, and it was by necessity, to go out and enter the workforce at a time when it was hard for women to be in the workforce. And she didn't just go out and get a job anywhere. She went and got a job at GAF selling shingles, which at the time was a man's industry. She was the only one in the entire region who was a female salesperson. I'm so proud of her for doing that. She's been such an example to my 3 girls to show them that, no matter what adversity your life brings, and it will come, you have to dust yourself off, stand up, and move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Councilman Smiley.
There's a lot of people I can name, from the great Carl Johnson Sr. to former Commissioner Julian Bolton, but I want to talk specifically about my dad. I think the first Tuesday in April of this year, we had a long council meeting, and I leave council meeting, I had to go home and let my dog out. Then I drove about 7 miles down the street to the VA hospital. I got on the elevator and I went up to the second floor, and I go into the room and I sit into the chair, and in a bed laying next to me was my father. And I asked him, how are you doing? And he immediately pushed back and said, son, don't worry about me, I'll be okay. As long as I know that you're out there fighting for Tennesseans, I'm gonna fight to be here. And it's that type of spirit that always moves me to do everything that I can for other people. My father is a fighter, he's hardworking, but most importantly, he sacrificed his entire life to make life better for people, and that's the life and that's the example that I'm ultimately hoping to fulfill.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for sharing this vulnerability. Appreciate it. We have now come to the concluding statements for the candidates, who want to thank you so much for being here, and to our audience both in person and also watching online. The order will be Dr. Martin, Councilman Smiley, and Dr. Atwater. You have 90 seconds to make a concluding statement. Dr. Martin.
First of all, I want to thank everyone here tonight, thank our hosts. This has been a great event. And I also want to thank my fellow candidates. I think we sharpen each other, and it's been a great experience for me personally. Look, we've been across the state, all 95 counties, 25,000 miles up and down I-40. And what I can tell you after that experience is that we have so much more that unites us than that which divides us. And that is what we need to focus on. That is how we are going to win this election in November. By talking about healthcare, education, infrastructure, especially broadband out in rural Tennessee. And we're going to talk about equitable economic growth across the state. We're going to talk about defending women's health rights, and we're going to talk about legalizing cannabis. These are issues that bring Tennesseans together, and that's how we're going to win this race. I cannot do it alone. I'm going to have help from about 400,000 more of my friends than voted in the last election, but I know that we can do this together, because on our campaign, we believe right down here, deep in the heart, that whether you live in Memphis or Mountain City, no matter the color of your skin, how much money you have in the bank, or who you choose to love, Tennessee should be the land of opportunity for you. Let's make it happen, guys.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Councilman Smiley.
Thank you all for being here. Thank University of Tennessee Health Science Center for allowing this opportunity, US Today Network for putting this on. We have an opportunity this particular election to do something that not many folks around this country believe is possible. We have an opportunity to change the way that we're dealing with the criminal justice system. We have an opportunity to reimagine how we handle education. We have an opportunity to use the $300+ that we're putting in the Reserve Day Fund to put money into marginalized communities. But we cannot do that if we do not put the right candidate on the ballot in November. We need a candidate that's competent, but that's also compassionate. A candidate that understands what it's like to struggle in Tennessee. A candidate that understands the law. A candidate that has some experience managing or allocating $750 million budget. We can do this together. So what I would ask each and every one of you is to join our fight. Invest in yourself, invest in West Tennessee, invest in Memphis by electing me, Councilman J.B. Smiley Jr. to be the next governor of the great state of Tennessee. You can learn more by visiting votejbsmiley.com, and thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Councilman Smiley. And last but not least, Dr. Atwood.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the invite. So we have the fantasy, these two here are sweet. I speak truth to power. And we need someone that's bold, unwavering, unshakable, unbossed, and unbought in this governorship. I think I can beat Governor Lee because I know how to speak his language. And I'm not going to go in soft. It's a time and a place to compromise, but right now, we need boots on the ground with someone that can go in there and take the people's government back. And I'm that person. I'm that boots on the ground person. I'm that life experience person. I come with compassion because I've been doing it over 25 years. I am the people's governor. Please vote for me, Atwater, for governor on August the 4th, 2022. 22, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atwater. And again, there's some thank yous again to the Tennessee system, especially the Health Science Center, to Chancellor Buckley, to Sally, to Peggy. The timekeeper has been absolutely wonderful. A special thanks to the Commercial Appeal, Mark Russell and Samuel Hardiman. If you are not a subscriber to the Commercial Appeal, you can go to commercialappeal.com/subscribe. We definitely want you to invest in local journalism so we can continue doing these kinds of programs. But let's give a great round of applause to all of our candidates here tonight.
Moderator, we won't be a Lee up in here. Then we can show up and show out.
All right,